plot. Just a recap of the plot of the play. You have a man, Monsieur Jourdain, who has become very wealthy, and instead of deciding that he would use his money for good, he becomes very pompous and wants to become important. And he thinks that the way to become important is to marry his daughter off to a noble person. Now, a noble person is somebody who has a title like a lord or a lady or a duke or something like that, or a count. His daughter, on the other hand, wants to marry this nice guy, and he refuses this man, and he says, no, you can't do that, you can't marry him, you're going to have to marry a duke. Now his daughter's distraught, his wife is very angry about it, and in the end, the guy who she wants to marry tricks Cleon, tricks him by pretending to be the son of the grand high Turkish nobleman, the Sultan, if you like, something like that, and pretends that he is that man's son, and he marries her in disguise. And that's the plot. It's very straightforward, really, apart from the fact that we see along the way how pretentious Monsieur Jourdain is, how all his grand ideas, his pretentious ideas about becoming somebody himself who is related to the nobility, related to kings and queens and dukes and dukes and duchesses and things like that. We see that it's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous aspiration, and we see that what happens there is he makes himself look foolish. So, in a way, what this play is about is how men become foolish when they have too much money, and that they do things which are not creditable and not nice. And what it does by showing him up to be a fool, it's a sort of morality play. So the morality of the play is, if you have a lot of money, be careful that it doesn't make you become a ridiculous person. Use the money wisely, and don't think about status and high status and your value as a person, because it's a sort of false way to go. So that's the message of the play. The message of the play is that, you become ridiculous when you take yourself too seriously because you have a lot of money and you act in that way. The key thing that's going to be asked about in the exam probably is, how is that message put over by the actors? Well, for a start, I directed Monsieur Jourdain to be very over the top in his gestures, and to be very over the top vocally as well. We went for a sort of what I would call a camp vocal characterization, which means that it was very theatrical, it was a little bit effeminate, which means feminine or female sort of, and in some ways that this could be seen as as a characterization of a stereotypical sort of gay character, although he wasn't a gay character, and that's not the idea. The whole reason I say that is because in the 17th and 18th centuries there was a tradition of the dandy or the fop, and they were straight or heterosexual men who behaved in a very feminine, rather exaggerated way. They dressed in very exaggerated and extravagant clothing, lots of bright colours, they wore lots of jewellery, and they were, just looking at them, you would think they weren't very manly. And I wanted Monsieur Jourdain to look like that, because there is something quite comical in men who behave in a way that is not manly. There is something, in that contrast, there is something quite amusing. Now the idea is to make him look as ridiculous as possible. To make him look ridiculous, physically look ridiculous, both in his movements and in the way he's dressed, it works in terms of helping support the message of the play, which is, this character is a ridiculous character because of his love of money and what he thinks money is going to buy him. The exaggeration of the characterization, again, helps support that, because when things are a bit exaggerated, well, that creates comedy, doesn't it? Exaggeration leads to amusement in some way. And his gestures were very large and flamboyant. And you see that with his wife, she was flamboyant as well, but in a sense, what happens with her is, every time she comes in on a scene, but almost every time she comes in on a scene, she comes in and she's appalled by what she sees, and she shouts or she screeches at him. So all of her gestures and all of her movement and all of her responses at certain points are very exaggerated as well. Now this play, in terms of genre, well, it is a morality play, it is a comedy, but it's also, in the way I've directed it, it's a bit farcical. Now, farce is a type of play which is performed very quickly. Now, I'm not saying fast with the T, I'm saying farce, F-A-R-C-E, a farcical structure. This is where people rush in and out, and there are lots of plot complications, and that's what I did with this performance. I made sure that it was like that, and in particular, in Act 2, Scene 2, where where Monsieur Jourdain and Madame Jourdain rush onto the stage very, very fast, and their dialogue is extremely fast-paced. I mean, it's the fastest paced of any point in the play, and I think it's probably faster than any play I've directed before as well. So it was extremely fast, the pace at that particular point. And it was very funny. So we've got these Monsieur Jourdain with these camp gestures, and in a sense as well, Madame Jourdain was rather camp because we exaggerated her vocally. So we exaggerated her, the elongation of her phrases and some of the responses. We made her camp, we made her over the top as well. So the two of them had the same sort of characterization, and they both spoke at an exceptionally fast pace. And at that point then Cléante comes in, and he asks for Monsieur Jourdain's daughter's hand in marriage, and Monsieur Jourdain refuses him at that particular point. In addition to the nature of the play in relation to putting that message over, I also wanted to create an idea of period to a certain degree. And physically, we've got the bows, so you've got the actors bending forward, and then they kind of sort of do this sort of flourish with their hands. This is all, A, it's good for the period, B, it's also good for a sense of exaggeration, and C, I suppose it's about style. I wanted the style of the piece to be appropriate, vaguely appropriate for the 17th century, roughly the 17th century. And if we're looking at how we sort of point up the message of the play, Monsieur Jourdain is not an unpleasant man. He's not a nasty man, but we do show that when it comes to the point at which his daughter, the Cléante asks for his daughter's hand in marriage, and he says no, we show that he has no concern for other people's feelings. And this is done because in the text it's quite clear that he doesn't have any concern really for how Cléante is going to feel about it. But in addition to that, we show it because when he says no, the way in which the actor delivers that line about no, she's not for you, you can forget about it, he's quite harsh, he's quite brutal. And we see that actually the message of the play is don't be foolish, don't allow yourself to get sucked into folly by being, by thinking too much about money and the value of money. But it's actually more than that, and it's a rather darker message, and that comes across quite nicely there. And that is that his whole attitude at that point shows that money has corrupted him more deeply than that. It's corrupted him because he has no consideration or care for other people. He has no consideration for his daughter, he has no consideration for his wife, and he has no consideration for Cléante. So what we see is that money has made him vainglorious, it's made him sensitive only to his own needs and wishes, it's made him incredibly selfish. So really, there is this phrase about power, which is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But if you think about it, this play is very much about the corrupting influence of money. And what we've got here is a man who seems fairly pleasant and nice at the beginning, but silly. But it shows that money has actually corrupted him much more deeply than that. In that he has become utterly self-seeking, self-obsessed, and he doesn't consider the feelings of his family, even down to the wishes of his daughter or his wife, who presumably he's been married to for many, many years. He becomes really quite a horrible character, and therefore as an audience at the end we can laugh at his foolishness in the fact that his daughter has managed to get married to the man that she wanted to by tricking him. We don't feel that the daughter is in any way being bad in what she's done. We're sympathetic to her purely because we know that her provocation was so big that the way he had his nastiness made us empathise with her, made us sympathise with her. So that serves the message of the play as well. Because if we had sympathised with Monsieur Jourdain, then that would have weakened the message of the corrupting power of money. And the key thing is, of course, that the whole idea behind this play is that we see that money, it's about money being the root of all evil, which I don't know if that's in the Bible, but I mean, it's a very, very sort of famous phrase, isn't it? Money is the root of all evil. It shows us that money has corrupted Monsieur Jourdain so badly that he has gone against his family, he's made himself look foolish, and he's tried to, you know, with all those various things that happen in the play about the dancing master, the philosopher, and all the rest of it, it shows us that he's lost his moral compass, he's lost his way in the world, because money has so changed him. So the key thing is, how have they achieved that through their acting? Well, they've achieved that through helping us to sympathise with the daughter and the wife, by being unsympathetic to him because of the way he acts, by making himself a figure of ridicule and a figure of fun. If he'd come out and he'd been a serious, nice character all the way through, and he hadn't been over the top in the way that he was, then this would not have been a comedy. It would have been a very serious play. But what is this? This is a big, bold, lively comedy, and there is this very important message that is kind of attached to it, the subtext, if you like, of it, the message underneath the main message. The main message is the story of the play, but the subtext is all about the corrupting influence of money, and money being the root of all evil. And so therefore it is a morality play. The moral is, don't allow wealth to change you for the worse. Try to be a good person, whether you're wealthy or not.